I think Andrea is at Emory.
YouTube mics are hot.
Oh, we on YouTube right?
Live stream.
Queuing up the intro.
Look like something to you for the people. Well, send me the link. I can share it on my Facebook.
I don't even have a link yet.
Oh, okay, cool.
There it is. You got an iPhone?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's always the default question here. I'm like, do you have an iPhone?
You look at folks today, you ain't got no iPhone.
Peasants.
So what you people?
They gonna force me to get an iPhone because I hope.
Oh, you don't have an iPhone?
Nah, I like Android overall.
I was a BlackBerry person.
Word?
Yes, and I got an iPhone like my senior year at Valor, and I haven't had
Never
every
been
one
back.
since then.
That's how it be, man. Once they get you most of the time.
I got Apple everything at this point, though.
I'm fighting tooth and nail to hold on to it, but man, everybody around me got iPhone. They be sending messages to each other, and I be like, "Can y'all send me a message too?"
Yeah, it's like, then somebody you be in a group text somebody who don't have an iPhone, the quality of the picture comes through looking like what is this?
Right.
You trying to airdrop it or something?
Yeah, airdrop you the link.
Let me see my airdrop on.
Emmett?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Accept. Now, where does that link show here again?
So that sends you straight to the live stream.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let me
Can you text it to me, or do I need to post it, or?
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm sorry, Dave.
I can send it to you.
No, I just got.
Oh.
This is the first time, just working out kinks.
If you can send it to him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me make sure I got your song of the week queued up. Audrey Millennial.
Yeah, millennial problems. Yep.
I just texted to you.
Okay, got it.
Queuing up the intro.
You are now tuned in to the Trillmonga podcast, hosted by Dominic D. Breeze Brown, alongside co-hosts Josh Arthur X and Mike Hargrove, aka Stargrove. Content that'll feed the street. If you want to know that you know that you know, it's all going down only on the Trillmonga podcast, y'all.
What's going on, good people? It's your boy Dom. We are here finally with Trillmonga, the podcast. I am so happy you all are here to see the first episode. You all have been waiting on this for a while, so I'm very glad that you're here with us. We have a very special guest, which I'll introduce in a little while. I know you all are used to it being three of us in studio, but this is actually a surprise podcast. The fella with us today hit me up and let me know he was in town, because we were actually supposed to start this podcast next week. But when he told me he was in town, I was like, man, we got to get you on. And so I literally came in and set this up, and hey, we about to get to it. But overall, Mike is still here grinding. Stargrove, he's out building GMG music group, doing a fine job of it. Josh Arthur just got a new job, so congrats to Josh. Those guys will be back next week, but we just want to thank you all once again for tuning in to Trillmonga, the podcast. We got a dope season coming up for you all. You'll be able to listen to this podcast on Spotify, iTunes, all major platforms with eStream Live. So shout out to the guys helping us with this. But without further ado, I'll introduce our guest, the man, the myth, the legend. Today we have with us Dr. Emmett Riley. He is the assistant professor of Africana Studies at DePaul University. Me and this guy have been friends for a few years. When he told me he was in town, I had to have him on because, as I told you all, with Trillmonga, over the last few months, you all have probably gotten used to us doing music and having events and having fun, which we'll continue to do. But whatever I do, I always try to make sure there's a little bit of knowledge in it also, so we can move together as people and as a community. So we want to thank you, Dr. Emmett, for coming on with us today.
And thank you for having me. It's glad to be here, and I appreciate the invitation to come on, and appreciate all the good work that you are doing and you're continuing to do to uplift the community and to promote your brand. Mm-hmm. So definitely congratulations on all of that.
So I also must shout you out. You are a native Mississippi man, just like me.
That's right. That's right.
Tell the people where you're from. You're from Itta Mississippi.
From, as we call it, Itta Mississippi, a.k.a. home in the woods. Born and raised in the Mississippi Delta, have Mississippi in my blood. Mm-hmm. So I am a proud Mississippian.
Okay, well, like, you know, I love to keep the Mississippi strong in whatever we do. As I told you before, the other guys aren't here, but we are an all Mississippi cast. We're here in Atlanta, but, you know, we're trying to still make the takeover happen. So, once again, we definitely happy to have you with us. And I'm glad, you know, with you being our first guest, that you are a hometown guy, because that just makes the connection even that much more special.
Oh, absolutely.
So, tell the people a little bit about growing up in Itta, Mississippi. Like, what was that like?
Well, I grew up in Itta, Mississippi. Mm-hmm. It's a small town, about 2,000 people. I was raised in a single-parent home. My mom, Mrs. Johnny Riley, raised me. I was educated in the public school system there.
Part of the public school, baby.
That's right. That's right. LaFleur County High School class of 2004, as we said, LaFleur's greatest.
LaFleur County.
And so growing up in a small town, it's quite interesting when you grow up in an impoverished community and then you leave, because I never grew up feeling like I was impoverished or grew up feeling like I was missing something. It wasn't until I left and then I was able to return, it actually sink in that you grew up in this environment.
Right. It was normal to you.
Right. It was normal. So it was normal that we only had one grocery store. It was normal that that doctors were 30 minutes away. And if you wanted to go to professional services for healthcare treatment, you had to go to Jackson, which was an hour away.
Right.
So these were normal elements, but I never ever sort of thought about that I grew up poor.
Yeah.
And so I attended LaFleur County High School, graduated 2004. Then it was a question about where I would go to college. I went across the street to Mississippi Valley State University. My grandparents had always had significant roots with Valley. In fact, when they left Wildwood Plantation in 1958,
oh wow!
To migrate to Itta from Tutwiler, Mississippi,
they know all these small places.
Right, these little small towns. Their first employment was at Mississippi Valley. My great grandfather worked as a carpenter. My grandmother was employed there in the laundry services for more than 30 years. She retired, and my grandfather as well. And so I attended Mississippi Valley. I graduated from Valley with a degree in English and political science. And then there was a question about graduate school. I think black people, we have a unique experience about most of us don't have the luxury of not working and going to school. So I had to teach by day and go to school by night.
Yes, it's understood for most of us.
Yeah, and so in fact, I almost went to Mississippi State for grad work, but their program wouldn't permit me to work. So I ended up going to Jackson State, where I would teach in Greenwood, and then by night I would drive to Jackson to attend class and drive back to the Delta. And I did that for
that's impressive.
Yeah, and I did that for 2 years until I finished my master's in political science. And by that time, I knew I wanted to do a PhD. It was a question about where I would go. And so I decided I really didn't want to leave Mississippi. And so I have been accepted to the University of Michigan. I've been accepted to Ohio State, some top tier programs.
Top programs, man.
Yeah. And I settled for Ole Miss, an unranked program.
We'll forgive you for that one as a Mississippi State graduate.
Yeah. Right. Don't let me get Aaron Rollins started. And it's interesting. Aaron was at Mississippi State working on his PhD as an Ole Miss alum the same time I was at Ole Miss. And so I went to Ole Miss, did a PhD in political science with a specialization in American politics. Specifically, my focus was the United States Congress as a political institutions, but I was also always intrigued by the question of race. And so because I had attended Jackson State, I was able to write a research agenda into that program, which did not focus on race, but I was able to write that research into my in studies because I knew the literature. And so I finished there, and I started teaching at Coleman Community College. Once I finished my PhD, I was in Mississippi about a year, and then I was hired as a visiting professor of political science at DePaul University in Greencastle, Indiana.
So that's how you got to Indiana.
That's how I got to Indiana, and it was a risk. I knew I didn't want to be at a community college as a person with a PhD, and so there was a position open for a 1-year position, no guarantee that it would turn into anything else.
Right.
At the end of the year, your contract would be over. So I came to DePaul, and my visitingship turned into a tenure track offer.
Oh man!
And so by December of that year,
right?
That was exactly what I wanted. And by December that year, I had landed a tenure track position. It was a salary that was competitive, a research budget that awed me, and so the rest has been history. And so I've been at DePaul for the last 6 years. In terms of what I do there, I teach Africana Studies, so I teach the introduction to Africana Studies, but I also teach everything that I teach in political science. I teach identity politics, I teach race politics, I teach legislative process, I teach race politics.
And these are all very important, foundations of a lot of things that people don't realize.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Commendable. And I think with me, I actually must brag on you for a second because you're one of the guys I learned a lot from on the political science side. You and one of my other mentors, Detrick.
Okay. Sociologist.
So I went to college with Detrick, and he's a doctor now, and I think he just got a job at UT
Knox. Yeah,
exactly. So it's been cool to see you guys progress. And I remember, and Detrick will probably tell you this, but he was we're both alphas, so we know the inner workings of our organization, but he was one of the older brothers that kind of looked out for us, and he would always talk to me about race and politics and different things like that. And when I was younger, I don't want to hear this shit. I'm in college, I'm trying to have fun. I'm done. Detrick, why are you talking about this stuff? You know. But as I got older, all the things that he would say or all the things that he would tell me would literally come back either in life situations, and I realized literally there's no way out of politics. It's in everything. And so just growing up, maturing a little bit, and looking back on some of the things that he would tell me in college, kind of man, if I was like that, and I had the chance to learn a little bit and to come out of that shell of ignorance in a lot of ways, it definitely made me into the person I am today. So I commend you guys for doing what you do, for being impressionable. And that's one of the reasons I actually invited you onto the show today, because with all of the political things going on in today's world, a lot of people don't understand it.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
And you're one of the people that I felt like could come on the show, and yes, we're about creativity, yes, we're about music, and yes, we're all about things, but we're about real life also.
Right.
And with the election coming up this next year, it's been a lot of stuff going on, and some people are on the sidelines, and some people are, kind of trying to be as involved as possible. So you have very polar opposites when it comes to politics. So one of the reasons I wanted you to come on today is we want to talk about the importance of the black vote in this political process, and just generally asking that question, to you, what is the black vote? Because you hear people say that all the time. What is the black vote? How powerful is it? And what can we do with it here in the United States?
Yeah. So when we talk about the black vote within the context of studying political behavior, we're talking about how do black voters behave in the aggregate. That is, say, for example, the percentage of blacks that live in Fulton County, how do they typically vote?
Yeah.
While we understand that blacks are not monolithic, there is deep complexity within the black community in terms of who we decide to vote for, our political identity, our political ideologies, and how those ideologies may be radical or non-radical. So when we refer to the black vote, I think people are talking about that. In terms of the black vote as it relates to the American political electorate, the black vote is essential to the Democratic Party's success on a presidential election or in a presidential year. I think that when we think about the governor's race in Alabama. It was African-American women who propelled Doug Jones to victory.
Yeah.
When we think about the re-election of the Democratic governor in Louisiana, it was the black voters who in Louisiana who propelled them to victory. When you think about the black vote right here in Atlanta, it was the black vote who razor thin because of gentrification and all the shit that's going on around that propelled Keisha Bottoms to her mayorship. So the black vote has been essential to political representation for black people. Now, when we talk about political representation, what are we talking about? There's descriptive representation. That is the degree to which a candidate shares the race, ethnicity, or gender of the people that they represent. So Keisha Bottoms descriptively represent African-American women here in Atlanta.
Right.
Barack Obama descriptively represented black folk nationally. And then there is substantive representation, which is the degree to which a representative actually pursue policies that benefit the interest of the communities that they represent. And so if we think about some of the important work that has been done within the continent, this is the professor coming at me now, that's been done.
Like you stood up in your chair a little bit.
That's been done in political science. We look to individuals like Claudine Gay, who talks about black descriptive representation inherently increases trust and political engagement in institutions. And so we think about if a black person is running, you're more likely to get high turnout if it's their first time running. So the black vote is essential to the Democratic Party's success, and I think the black vote has essentially defined the Democratic nominee in the Democratic Party that's happening now.
Now let me stop you there because I want to interject. Because one of the things I've heard from the streets, we talk to a lot of people, and one thing I found dealing with younger people is that they don't feel like the Democratic Party takes their vote seriously. What could you say to young people that because I, as a 34-year-old man, often do feel like the Democratic Party doesn't do enough to garner the black vote how they should because they're used to us automatically voting for them. So what would be your mindset on things like that?
So if we're thinking about how do we define black interests, what does the black agenda look like, where it has the Democratic Party historically stood as it relates to that agenda, and how might that agenda usher its way through a legislative chamber, given the balance of power or lack thereof between the two major political parties, those are all important factors to consider. I do think that the Democratic Party has historically taken the black vote for granted, but the question becomes, what is the consequence of black voters sitting out an election? Let's say, for example, the Democratic Party has taken black voters' vote for granted, but in the process, there have been incremental change. The American Affordable Health Care Act. You've gotten, I was about to say a Supreme Court justice, we can't talk about Clarence Thomas, but we'll go to our alpha brother, Thurgood Marshall. check. Or we'll at least say, let's talk to our sister Sonia Sotomayor.
Yeah.
Those are also benefits for the black community who sits on the court, who's hearing cases about voting rights, who's hearing cases about employment discrimination. And so while the question then becomes, how do we then measure what's taken for granted?
Gotcha.
And then do we have the same energy of organizing at the local level that we do at the presidential level? And I'll give you an example of that. When Kamala Harris announced she's running for president, people came in, she locked black parents up. She did this for insurance officers. She was terrible this here. And yet, if you ask these same black people, what is the position of your local prosecutor on prosecuting marijuana sentences?
Right.
The overwhelming majority of them are still locking black folks up.
Very important because that's what most of us are in jail for.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the question we have as black voters, we are very strategic. We're very pragmatic. But I also think that sometimes we get lost in the rhetoric in a way that doesn't really square with the reality. I mean, politics is messy. It's a slow process. But the question we have to ask ourselves is, what do we owe our children? What do we owe the generation before? And if we are the generation that is going to be so arrogant to say that we're not going to vote for anybody because we're not getting anything, and then you get a Supreme Court case as worse as Shelby County handed down, we have nobody to blame but ourselves. To that degree. Very true. I don't like blaming black people for the plight because the way in which white supremacy work is that there are multiple layers before we get to it's all on black folks.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of people miss. I think that's one of the things that frustrates me when people don't tell the whole story. Like it's okay, yeah, we do all have a responsibility to do our part, but at the same time, what factors are going into the outcome? Like what factors are going into why people don't want to vote? What factors are going into, because like even here in Georgia, last election cycle we had a lot of voter suppression. We had a lot of things that should be going on that weren't. So with that being said, we're gonna run a clip right quick from the Democratic primaries that are going on right now. It's pretty much down to two candidates for the most part, Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders. So give it just a second and we'll run that clip.
On Tuesday, 6 states are up for grabs, with Michigan, of course, being the biggest prize. The campaign is now a clear two-man contest between Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders. Both of them are out campaigning hard this weekend, and ABC's Rachel Scott is out with them in St. Louis with more. Good morning, Rachel.
Mary, good morning. Just last week, Joe Biden lags behind his rivals in fundraising and advertising. 48 hours out from the next set of primaries, his campaign says he raised $22 million in 5 days, launching his biggest ad buy yet, and now netting another key endorsement from a former rival, Senator Kamala Harris, backing Biden. With a burst of new momentum, Joe Biden on the campaign trail in Missouri, turning out some of his largest crowds this election cycle.
Today, 11 victories behind us. We lead the national delegates. We need a national vote.
Charging into the next round of contests, hoping to keep an edge on Senator Bernie Sanders.
Bernie says we got to have turnout to beat Trump. Well, guess what? We turned him out.
Flush with cash, the former VP using his latest fundraising haul to launch a $12 million ad buy in 6 key states, with a message for his rival.
PolitiFact has called the Sanders campaign's attacks false.
But Senator Bernie Sanders is not letting up, stepping up his attacks.
Those trade agreements were a disaster. Joe was wrong. I was right.
All right, we are back. Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders are in the showdown today. So once again, you and I have had quite a few conversations on the political climate right now. So with the Democratic primaries going on, like, what are your overall thoughts, and like, what are your overall thoughts also on the last 2 people left? Like, what are your feelings on it?
So I have a lot of feelings on it, actually. So let's go. I was actually on a show earlier today, and I talked about we have to understand what's happening. Ronald Walters writes in White Nationalism, Black Interest, that the American political structure is based on what he calls the equilibrium. And that this equilibrium has always been white powers that seeks to control the political forces. He questions what happens when there are attempts to disrupt an equilibrium. Typically, the response has been white rage, white anger, white hate, white resistance. We saw this.
Life right now, basically.
Right. Hello. Right. So Barack Obama, imagine Barack Obama, a vinegar in a cylinder. Barack Obama jumps into the cylinder as soda, and it explodes. And the explosion is white anger and white supremacy. And so right now, we had a diverse field of candidates running for president. An African American woman, an African American man, 2 white women. Just a wide array of diversity. And ultimately, we're down to 2 old white men.
Now look at us now, right? 2 old white men representing.
Which is the balance to that equilibrium that Ronald Walters writes about in 2001. Now the choice becomes, how do we balance the equilibrium? Is it Bernie Sanders? Is it Trump? Is it Biden? Now, I don't think that either Bernie Sanders or Biden are remotely comparable to Donald Trump in terms of ideology, in terms of governance, in terms of what they mean for the political institutions. But I do think that the Democratic race has been interesting because many people thought that this was Bernie Sanders' race to lose. People said Joe Biden was a hot mess. He was a walking time bomb. And what the exit polling has revealed is that there are large swaths of voters who see Joe Biden as being highly electable up against Donald Trump. And as I say, that many people on the Sanders camp will say, well, we are the best way to beat Donald Trump. And that argument doesn't hold if you can't win a presidential primary.
Yeah, very true.
Last time it was the Democratic Party took it from Hillary and gave it to Bernie.
It was all kind of BS last time.
Yeah, and so people bought that. Now I never bought the notion that the Democratic Party cheated to tip the race. Here's what I tell people.
I gotta hear this. It's gonna
Here's
be a hot
what I
take.
tell people, and I told Dedrick this. Imagine the way we nominate people for nominations for parties is that if you are in a party, you are the favorite child. Imagine me announcing, I'm about to run for national president of Kappa Alpha Psi. The Kappa's going to be like, what? And everybody who's a member of the club, everybody who's a dues-paying card-carrying member of the club is going to work like hell to defeat my candidacy.
Exactly.
The same is with Sanders. Sanders is not a Democrat. He is never affiliated with the Democratic Party, so it is conceivable that the people in the party are going to work to nominate someone that they know more than Sanders. Now, if he's able to compete, I believe that the election should be fair. I believe that the system should maintain its integrity. But at the same point in time, it's not uncommon for people to be favorites. It's just not. And so with that being said, this notion of now, what's the excuse this year? Are people cheating? There is no cheating. There is no Hillary Clinton around. In fact, people are doing to Biden eventually what they did to Hillary.
You think so?
Oh, absolutely.
How
I think
so?
this Hunter Biden mess about Ukraine is an attempt to demonize Hillary. Joe Biden was the best thing since light bread when Barack Obama named him as his vice president. He was the one who had the wisdom.
Yeah.
He was the foreign policy. He was going to balance the ticket.
I was looking back at old tweets like from years ago about like people's response to Joe Biden. Like it was all Uncle Joe, and you know what I'm saying? Like it was a lot nicer tone than I think overall what it is now.
And people wanted him to jump into the race to challenge Hillary because they didn't want Hillary.
I remember all of this.
And now Joe Biden is the worst person since Ross Perot.
So what does that tell you about like American politics in general?
It tells me that the Russians are very effective at engaging in political psychology to paint processes in a negative light by taking real facts and decontextualizing them in a way to influence people to not engage in a process.
Gotcha.
Because you get the notion that, and let me be clear, I'm no fan of Joe Biden.
No study.
I was the first one to say that he deserved to be called out for his role in authoring the crime bill. He was in fact, this should have been a question when Barack Obama named him as president, but we were so happy for a black president that we tucked our tails.
Yes, very true.
So we definitely need to contextualize that in a way where his record is there, and we can be critical of Biden's record, and at the same time put pressure on him to say, what are you going to deliver as the candidate?
And I think for me, that's the most frustrating thing, because I know we all, it's America. We all have our favorite, who we like to be the nominee and different things like that. But overall, I've seen a cast of candidates. Like I said, we did have a very diverse field of candidates this time. But once again, it ended up like American pie, like old white men. It's kind of like I feel like right now there's almost a war of power going on between young people and older people, and so I feel like it's weird that it's almost a changing of guards right now, and I feel like that's why the fight is almost seems like a heightened sense because young people are like feel like we done walk into some bullshit. Old people not necessarily ready to give up the torch either, so it's kind of like you really feel that power struggle between old and young. And where do you feel like that comes from?
I think that we older people and younger people sort of understand the world and process the world in different realities. I think that older people who experienced Jim Crow, who experienced and lived through segregation, who experienced gender equality in a different way, gender inequality in a different way, understands that they didn't wake up as not having access to certain schools and then having access tomorrow. That it occurred over a period of time. Yeah. And I think that our generation we want equality and we want it now and we want it how we want it and we're not taking anything less. And I think that that's good for a power line, but our institutions aren't built that way. Yeah. And we can talk all day about what the institution should be, that's a different conversation than what they are.
Yeah.
And I think the way our institutions work, change is incremental. Change is slow within a democracy, within a democratic process. And I think that the younger generation has got to understand that. And because otherwise you get frustrated, you pull out from the system, and you end up in a worse predicament than you are. Think about people say Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump was the same thing. They were the same person.
But her emails.
But it was email every single day. Yeah. And now you hadn't heard anything about an email. I mean, an email.
At least not those emails.
Right. So an email scandal sounds, a lot less interesting than it did, and a lot of people bought into that.
Yeah.
And a lot of it with the last presidential election was gender. I think that race and gender plays a different role. People can easily identify.
Which I think was on full display last election. It really made me realize how much people will put themselves ahead of, or put certain causes ahead of even themselves with the 53%, you know what I'm saying, with, we had a president who literally, his motto was grab them by the pussy for the most part, and then you had women go out and vote for,
and had shirts that he can grab my union.
Right, so it just put me into a whole different mindset on how the political system actually works and the power structures and what people do to keep a certain level of power.
I tell people all the time, y'all gonna stop depending on these white women for your political plight, and because white women, by and large, have nailed black interests to the cross,
coughing every
and
time,
voted their race every single. And you think about Susan Collins, who came out, we're gonna see Kavanaugh,
and it baffles me so much. People and once again, I have to make allowance for people to have freedom to choose however they want and act however they want to, but it's just baffling to me to see especially in this age of powerful women and women's rights, and it's almost a whole second wave of of war for women, and then to see some women get up and almost on some Handmaid's Tale type stuff, and so it just really makes me start to understand the psychological aspects of politics also, because it's quite interesting.
But again, it goes back to the question of race. It goes back to the question of race, that white women will vote for their race over their gender, and I think people arrive at support for certain things a different way.
Very true.
I have to be absolutely clear about the political environment that we exist in. This shit has everything to do with white supremacy as an ideology that is attempting to change a country that is becoming more black and more brown, and that the backlash that we're seeing happening both in our politics, in the rhetoric that's happening in state legislatures across the U.S. is all grounded in that. We can talk about, people ask me all the time, are all Trump supporters racist? Hell yeah. If you can vote for a candidate,
it's real, that
disparate, and of course, if anybody objects to this, you can cite my publication in the Journal of Race and Policy.
Hey, we're gonna leave all his ad information out today.
You can cite that. Well, we find that 70% of Trump supporters see that white people are discriminated against daily. Well, 70% of Trump supporters describe Latinos, blacks, and other racial and ethnic minorities as violent. And so where do these attitudes come from? It's almost existing in a totally different reality from where everyone else lives.
And I think that was one of the biggest things that interested me about your studies, because you literally study how the world reacts to black, political leadership. And so even here in Atlanta, that's been very much on full display. Even with the last election, we had a lot of, they almost tried to form the Avengers to stop, and Mayor Bottoms, and no matter how, because I have my own feelings about Mayor Bottoms also, but just in general, you literally could see the response to it was almost a fight for blackness in Atlanta, the leadership, and I feel like she only won the mayorship by 700 some votes in the city of millions, And
mark my words.
So
Atlanta will have a white mayor within the next 2 election cycles.
I think the next election, especially with the way that the mayorship is going now, because in the whole scheme of things, she's found a way to piss off both sides. So I'm going to be interested to see, this next election where things going to get really interesting.
And black mayors in particular are in a very interesting position.
They are.
Because on the one hand, in a city like Atlanta, you want to show where the infrastructure is improving, where the infrastructure is nice, where you're building new and improved homes in your city to make it look attractive. On the other hand, that comes at the expense of gentrification.
Yeah.
And so the people that you're replacing into these areas are typically people who cannot, are typically white people.
Yeah.
And so they're the ones who are not going to vote for you in the get-go. And so black constituents become angry and frustrated at what progress is the city making, which is another question that I'm interested in terms
I feel
of
like that's exactly where we
directing
are
of my
in Atlanta.
research is, what is the best way to evaluate black politicians?
And we were talking about this before the podcast about the search for almost perfect saviors and perfect leaders amongst, the black community. And once again, I'm not one to ever think we're ever going to have a perfect leader. And, it shouldn't be expected. Like, everybody makes mistakes. Everybody's going to probably say something to piss you off or do something that's going to make you mad, or you're not going to feel a certain way about it. But like, I'll tell you a perfect example. Mike Bloomberg. Overall, to me, trash dude. Trash. Like, I would never want to vote for him for anything. But as soon as he got done with his political ambitions or whatever, he stepped back and he started powering, a lot of political moves with his money that need to happen. And so it's one of those things to where just letting people realize that, like, sometimes people aren't all good, but they aren't all bad either. Like, everybody has, perks. Everybody has, cons.
Everybody has a role to play. And I think even in as much as Michael Bloomberg represents, in terms of his record on race, being very troubled, we need to milk his cow for what it's worth.
Right.
If he's going to donate money to help defeat Donald Trump, we invite you in here too.
Right.
And we invite you to the table. And I think that these are important questions that politicians don't do a really good enough job of explaining to their constituents the unique position that they're in, and when they can act and when they can't act.
Yeah.
And so oftentimes, we sort of are in between this gray area. Like, I was on a podcast, somebody said, well, Barack Obama didn't do anything for black people. Black unemployment went up.
Oh, man, you hit it all the time.
That. We did. But we had just come out of the worst economic recession since the Great Depression under George W. Bush. Yep. Okay.
Tell the whole story.
Right. So we can't just tell part of the story. And oftentimes, that's why I say our generation, unfortunately, love to talk about criminal justice reform. They can tell you all about Michelle Alexander's book, but they can only tell you about chapter 2. They can't tell you anything beyond chapter 2.
Yeah.
Because the only thing they read is about the cleansing the crime bill and the black caucus, and sentencing rates went up. What they don't tell you is that a disproportionate number of black folk who are serving mandatory minimums are serving them under local state statutes,
and that's
not the federal level.
And that's another thing I want to really stress to all of our listeners, and we talk about it on all of our platforms, but the importance of local elections.
Absolutely.
Because I feel like overall that's one area that conservatives totally win a lot more than Democrats, because I think they realized a long time ago, if I can take over on a local level, everything else above will take care of itself. Because if you have power on the ground floor, that's all that matters.
Absolutely.
Because and the things that affect your day-to-day life, those are local elections.
Right now in Mississippi, Mike Espy is on the ballot, running to challenge Sidney Hyde Smith. And I'm calling out, he's going to lose this race. One reason why is
Mississippi is such a unique place.
It's a unique place, but more importantly, you need troops on the ground in the Delta,
and there are
in
none in
those
Mississippi.
rural pockets who are registering people, registering new voters, coming up with turnout plans. And I don't see that, at least talking to people I know on the ground in Mississippi, I don't see that happen. And so we lose so many local races that that should be competitive, but I think that this goes back to, what does the Democratic Party look like at a state level?
Right. And that's what people once again don't understand. Because I was trying to explain to one of my friends, because they were mad because Bernie didn't campaign in Mississippi. I was like, if you understood how Mississippi works, he made a smart decision not to come to Mississippi because it's literally no way ideally he can convert people from, you're not going to convert people from Donald Trump to Bernie Sanders.
Yes, I'm gonna push back against that a little because I got this same question on a show earlier. I think that Bernie Sanders made a terrible decision not going to Mississippi.
Yeah, I got to hear this out because I definitely want to hear your
And the reason I say why is think about Greenwood, Itta Bena, Greenville, Indianola, and the economic impoverishment that's in the Delta. And what is Bernie's whole message?
Yeah,
we got to lift people up. People are hurting. What would it mean for a white man who's looking to be president to go into those rural pockets and actually engage conversations about folk in Itta Bena don't have access to a grocery store? People in Morgan City don't even have a local gas station.
Go somewhere else
and I think that was an opportunity. You may not. The question becomes, how much would it have mattered? We would never know unless we see the data. But then the question is, where if you can't talk about economic justice in the Delta, where can you talk about it?
Very true.
And Bernie, and again, I wonder why didn't he do it? He doesn't embrace identity politics, but also you can't come in the Mississippi Delta talking about economic inequality without talking about racial inequality,
right? Because
it goes hand in hand with our sharecropping system and all of that. So I think he missed an opportunity. I don't think the goal should have been what really concerns me with Bernie supporters, particularly his white supporters. I cannot fathom how you could support a Bernie Sanders and then support a Trump. They're not even ideologically aligned.
Total opposite.
Totally opposite. Yeah. Which is a bit intriguing, interesting, and troubling to sort of just unpack what does that mean? How do you square that ideologically?
But yeah, man, it's just really interesting, man. In a little while, we're about to go to a music break. So one of the things I told you, like, we're a creative group. So one of the things I always want to do is have a song of the day for our podcast. The young lady that this song is from, her name is Audrey. She's also a fellow Mississippian. Shout out to Mississippi. And she came up here, I think, last weekend. And she was actually in a contest, a music contest. And so, of course, how as Mississippi people do, we go out and we support one another. And so my friends actually got me out into a club to see them perform. And she got up, performed in front of it's like a club full of gangster dudes, and you know what I'm saying, like it's the SWATs on a Saturday night here in Atlanta. So it should just tell you the crowd. But she got up and she performed and she just blew the crowd away and she won the whole thing. So I just wanted to kind of big up her. Make sure to follow her on IG. I'll give her information a little bit later, but this is her song called Millennial Problems by Audrey. So take a listen, and after this we'll be right back.
I see we making jokes about pain, poking fun objective situations like life and a thing. We smoke our pain away, hate to say it's the quick way to push it away, but it's only temporary. Can we find a better way? I tried to make this pill easier to swallow. We say we ain't got no feelings, but that's a lie though. My peers popping pills and we stay smoking gelato. I know folks afraid to fail, seems they can't live without the bottle. Tell me who we could run to, tell me who we should turn to. Some of us go to church, but most beat us with the Bible. I can only tell my truth, problems are solved at the root. Pray to God he reveals solutions that'll revive you. Social sites got us feeling like we got it made, but we are the same. Why should we change our mask and web space? Everybody's fronting, we don't know who has the ace of spades. There's so many things that millennials have to face, and there's so many things that millennials have to face. These are the problems of millennials. These are the problems of millennials. These are the problems of millennials. Ain't nobody trying to listen, no. These are the problems of millennials. These are the problems of millennials. These are the problems of millennials. Ain't nobody trying to listen, no. Low self-esteem. Father, help us please. Keep smiles on Instagram, pretending like we're not in need. I proceed to ask myself who is really on my team. I only trust in God, forget the rest. See what I mean? We only we feel value with money and diamonds in our grills. Chains around our necks and slavery how we wanna live. It's like we heard it's better to receive than it is to give. Previous generations did the same thing, let's keep it real. Not enough people to invest into our future. Who's gonna show us how to live without all of these filters? We screen nobody's perfect, but filter flaws out of our pictures. In a crowd of people still feeling left out the picture. We got wolves leading sheep to the slaughter. Don't know what's real from fake, so some deal by snorting powder. I heard them call us the generation of sensitive cowards, not afraid to show how we feel. I guess that's what I should be proud of. Not afraid to show how we feel. I guess that's what I should be proud of. Yeah. Not afraid to show how we feel. I guess that's what I should be proud of. These are the problems of millennials. These are the problems of millennials. These are the problems of millennials. Ain't nobody trying to listen, no. These are the problems of millennials. These are the problems of millennials. These are the problems of millennials. Ain't nobody trying to listen, no. Yeah, ain't nobody trying to listen, no. Trying to listen up. Yeah, ain't nobody trying to listen up. No, no, no. Let love rain, let love rain, let love rain, yeah, yeah. Let love rain, let love rain, yeah. Let love rain, let love rain, let love rain. Let it rain.
All right, once again, that was Audrey with Millennial Problems, straight out of Grenada, Mississippi. Big ups, like we're rooting for you. I want you all to go follow her on Instagram. Her name is I am Audrey _official. IAMAUDRI _official. So she's part of the Trillmonga family. I told you we're gonna be putting out a lot of hot music. We're gonna be putting y'all on a lot of artists that are on the rise. So definitely check her out. Super talented. She raps, she sings, she writes, she, you know what I'm saying, produces. Literally just like a one-woman army. And it is International Women's Month. So, you know what I'm saying, we want to shout out our women on the team. So big ups to Audrey. Make sure y'all go follow her. But getting back into the swing of things with Dr. Emmett Riley here, we once again want to appreciate you for coming through. And you flew in. You flew in today, right?
Mm-hmm. This morning.
So, what was your experience like at flying in the airport with all the crazy things going on right now?
First of all, it was really crazy because I didn't sleep much last night. I was up on Hulu watching the Hillary Clinton documentary. So I went to sleep around 4, had an alarm set for 7. My flight was supposed to board at 9:15. Mm-hmm. I woke up at 9 a.m. running, trying to get to the airport. So I run. I don't check email. Don't do anything.
That's a bad start to the day right there.
So I'm 8 minutes from the airport, thank God. So I run to the airport. The Uber driver's flying to get me there. In line, I've checked through. I'm like, okay, I'm going to get on the flight. So my co-author, who is Clarissa Peterson, she's a full professor at DePaul University, the first black woman to be chair of political science, first black woman to get tenure in the department. She's been there about 20 years. She had a PhD from Emory. She's actually my co-author. We write all our pieces together. So she texted me. She was like, have you seen the university's email? I'm like, what are you talking about? So I opened up the email. The dean has sent me an email. Dear Professor Riley, all of your travel has been canceled and or suspended. I'm at this airport. I'm at the gate. Madam Dean, I'm gone.
Right.
And she was like, well, you know what? We may have to have you to self-quarantine when you get back. I'm like, what?
3 more days out.
Yeah. So flying the airport was interesting. I was able to pick where I wanted to sit at on Delta. I was able to, when I got to Atlanta, the airport was very skimpy. I was kind of a little on edge, you know, and you hear people cough or sneeze, you're like, oh God. But this is quite interesting, but I think that we don't know how this is going to play out. I do think that...
So I'm about to stop you for a minute. I'm about to have our engineer play a small clip of why your part of your travels were so interesting. So we're going to talk about the coronavirus after we listen to this clip.
Okay.
The Italian government tonight put the entire country on lockdown. All Italy now a zona rossa, a red zone. Before, the restrictions only applied to northern and central Italy. But tonight, the country that invented the term quarantine told its 60 million people they should stay at home. American Ali Asplin is on a U.S. military base in northern Italy.
But we're just doing the best we can, and the commanders are doing the best they can to keep people calm and give them the information that they deserve to know.
There are those furious at being confined. 6 died in prison riots in Italy. Inmates worried they're locked in with a killer they can't see. Italy's sweeping restrictions came just hours after the World Health Organization came within a hair's breadth of calling this a global pandemic.
Now that the virus has a foothold in so many countries, the threat of a pandemic has become very real.
In Israel, the government announcing all citizens returning from abroad will be put in quarantine. But in China, where the virus originated, some encouraging news. 11 of the 14 emergency hospitals crash built for the virus are closing.
So, as you all can see or hear, the coronavirus has the world in shambles right now. So I commend you for hopping on the plane to come to Atlanta and do your business, because a lot of people not hopping on planes right now. What was your mindset? You know, because I was following your social media earlier, and you took a picture of the airport, and it was like, I don't think I've ever seen the Atlanta airport that thin.
Yeah, me either. In fact, a couple weeks out, I had considered canceling my flight and just driving down. But then I was like, nah, you know what, let me take my chances.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, this is almost something like you grew up watching, like a scary
like a movie or something. Yeah.
I was in South Africa when the virus first started to spread. And so I had no anticipation that it would spread like wildfires. And then what's crazy is that this administration is so incompetent that I don't even trust them to manage heartburn, yet alone coronavirus. And here, you know,
get up off your president, man.
You know, I have a few choice words for the president. In fact, it's funny. I was in my class, and I'm always going in on Donald Trump in class. So
I
made the comment. I said, I don't dislike our president. The whole class just burst out laughing.
I know you lying.
But yeah, this is interesting. I think people need to be safe. But we are here in Atlanta. I'm here for a conference. The National Conference of Black Political Scientists. We've had a lot of cancellations, but we are moving forward with the conference, asking people to just take the necessary precautions, and hopefully, people will be well. I pray that I'm covered.
Hey man, that's the only thing you really can do, because I know people have different mindsets when dealing with things, but I'm just not a worrier. You know, like I feel like, man, if the coronavirus is gonna get me, it's gonna get me. It's like you can't run from something that's invisible, you know.
Right.
And so it's kind of like I feel like every day we wake up and we fight stuff that we don't even realize. So it's kind of like I'm not one to give myself one extra thing to worry about. Yes, of course I'm gonna be cautious. Yes, I'm gonna wash my hands, but I've been doing that already. So I think it's quite interesting that stores like there's no hand sanitizer on the shelves, and so it's like, what were y'all doing beforehand? Like, so it's just really interesting to see how people react to certain, stressors and indicators, and like it just chaos. The markets across the world are
in crisis.
Yeah, in crisis.
Universities are canceling classes. Travel. We have received notification that after spring break, we're likely to cancel classes for a couple of days. I know. Harvard has ordered students out of the dorm by Sunday.
Oh, seriously?
Yes. I mean,
wow.
And Purdue is looking at going online. There have been a number of universities. We've recalled our international programs from Italy.
Wow.
For sure. So it's really affecting our day-to-day operation. And to think that this day and age, given our medical advances, that we are where we are, that we don't even have testing kits readily available, is quite interesting.
And that's the biggest thing that I thought was interesting. And it's almost, I feel like Donald Trump is stressing the CDC the hell out. Because they'll say one thing, they'll say do this, this, and this, and he'll be like, well, fuck that shit.
we have a president that is incompetent. He is incompetent. This man cannot manage. Cannot even. The president is clearly underprepared to handle this. And clearly,
it's clear.
Mike Pence has been put over it.
And that was the funniest thing to me, because it's kind of like he put Mike Pence over it, and it's kind of like, it's almost just like his puppet. It's like, I'm really in charge, but I feel like he put Pence in place just to take the shots. When if this gets worse, and like I almost feel like it's a way to get Mike Pence out the way.
That's the equivalent of putting me in charge of psychological therapy for somebody. I don't know what I'm doing.
That's why I tell people at this rate, y'all might as well let me be president, man. I got y'all.
One of the things this president has revealed, he has set a very low bar for white men. A very low bar.
But I think once again, going back, it lets you know how low the bar is for some versus the other side. Because I feel like Donald Trump can do no wrong to some people, and Obama could do no right, So it's kind of like, I'm pretty sure, like, I try to be, very, very objective. I'm pretty sure it's the same way now, because with us, Donald Trump can do no right, so I understand the polarization once again.
But again, this is the story of black folk and minorities all throughout America. We have to be the best of the best, and even at our best, we're still not good enough for some people. The battles I have to fight as a university professor about my place at the institution, my value at the institution, the expertise that I bring to the table, it's quite interesting. And so, I'm here for the National Conference of Black Political Scientists. When we talk to different scholars from around the world, from around the U.S., I mean, and these people these are no intellectual lightweights. These are folks who you look at certain people, these are scholars who are the shit who, in terms of what they've contributed and the battles that they go to receive legitimacy at their institutions. It's almost just crazy,
Yeah. And I think that's one of the reasons I'm so interested about your journey at DePaul, because, like, once again, when I think of Indiana, I don't necessarily, I know there are black people there. I'm not, that naive, but ideally that's not the first thing that comes to mind when I think about Indiana. So, like, what's your experience been like, because you've been there 6 years now, so you've been able to ingrain yourself in the culture, with the people, the school. So overall, what would you say has been your experience as a young black, professor in the type of environment that you're in?
It's been hard. It has been hard. I came from an environment where I was used to being around black people. So coming from Valley, I was just being around black people. Then when I went to Ole Miss, it was the first time I was at a PWI. But the interesting thing about Ole Miss is that I knew where to find the black people. I knew where to find New Up. I knew where to find EJ. I knew, Abe was there. We could connect. And so when I got to DePaul, 218 faculty members and only 12 are black. And then of the 12 who are black, some of them you don't even see.
I'm about to say you probably
that you don't even come in contact with until something happened. And so you become the face of everything about black people. You go into community meetings, people looking at you, okay, what do the black people want? Hell, I don't know what they want.
You got the whole country on your back.
And then if you don't speak up for black interest, nobody else is going to do it. And so you get sort of tired of all the time having to be the voice of black communities and things that people say.
It's a lot of pressure, you know what I'm saying?
It's absolutely a lot of pressure. I think DePaul has been good for me professionally, but it has been psychologically and mentally taxing to exist in an environment where the design of the institution affirms that your presence isn't welcome.
And once again, that goes back to the institutions and how they're built and how things are meant to run.
And I'm hopeful. We just named our first black president, Dr. Lori S. White, who's coming from Wash U. We're excited to see, excited to have her on campus, and she certainly has the unwavering support of the Black Caucus, all 12 of us, and we would do what we need to do to support her. What also is interesting is that has been complex is you expect white people who are anti-black. But the encounters of blacks who are anti-black,
yeah,
and the way, and that's been some crazy shit. Like black people that you think who are on your team who aren't, where you have black students in your courses and the black students don't want to do the work, and then they encourage other black students not to take you because you're hard.
Yeah,
you know, when in the scheme of things, you are the one who are looking out for them. You're the one who are writing letters.
Right.
You're the one on campus with them late at night. So that's been sort of challenging, sort of dealing with that and sort of trying to make sense of it. The work that I do, I mean, I love to talk about race. I love to research about race, but this shit is depressing.
Yeah.
It is depressing in the sense that I am not convinced, based off of any empirical data or any models that I've done, that we are going to solve this question.
Right.
So how then do I grapple with making people aware and at the same time making them hopeful?
And this is where and once again, this is probably why I'm not in the position of you and Detrick and all those, because it's kind of like, I'm literally Killmonger. It's like, man, fuck this shit. Like, this shit ain't working no way. Let's burn it all down. But you know what I'm saying? That's why it's so important to have people like you in position. You know what I'm saying?
And so there are days you feel that. There are days where you go to work and you feel like, you know what? Why am I doing this shit? Why am I here?
But just think about the rare air that you're in, you know, and you're in places that, you know, 'cause I always tell people, when people ask what I do as an activist, I tell them a lot of times people look at what's on TV now and like what's going on. I tell people I'm fighting the fights that you don't even know that are going on right now that are affecting you. So and that's how I feel about, you know, a lot of, you know, academic, you know, intellectuals that are, you know, at the forefront of leadership in this country. It's kind of like you all get into spaces to represent us, whether you know what I'm saying, choose it or not, you know. But you're in those rooms, you're in those, you know, institutions to give somewhat of a voice, you know.
Give a voice and to talk and to advocate. For me, I can't exist at an institution and not speak for my people and not advocate for my people.
Right.
I just can't do that. There's something in me that won't allow me to do that.
Yeah.
But I once read somewhere where it says that there is a price to pay for loving black people publicly. And I think people don't understand
that's a strong statement.
The price that you pay for wanting equality, for asking an institution to do the basic things about your value. And I have watched as colleagues, courses have been marginalized, but it hadn't always, I don't think it hasn't been all necessarily bad. I think I've grown professionally at DePaul. I think that I have been able to reach students, and those are the that's the silver lining,
right?
Where you know you've encountered a student and you've impacted that student fundamentally, and so that's been the rewarding work. Is there continuing work to be done? Absolutely. I think that, and this is not these issues that I raise are not unique to DePaul.
Right.
I think that all PWIs,
and that's very important to notice.
Yes, are
yeah.
struggling with these questions and are trying to grapple and deal with these particular questions. But it's we got a long, as my grandma said, we got a long road to hoe.
In Mississippi, right there.
We got a long road to hoe.
But it's, you know, once again, like, you know, we are a creative platform, you know, so most time we, you know, it's not usual for us to talk about politics, but I wanted to take the time on our first podcast to talk about politics and to pick your mind to let people know that, you know, yes, outside of all the entertainment, yes, outside of all the fun, like, it's real life going on out here. And I think the last election taught us that elections have consequences, as we always say. So
I'm not sure we've learned that lesson as much as we need to.
Well, we about to see. We're about to have a retest real soon. Right. But overall, I just wanted to get the listeners to realize that, you know, I'm not saying you got to go be a political analyst or, you know, anything like that, but just learn the basics of your surroundings. Learn, you know, your local, learn your local officials. You know what I'm saying? Know what's going on outside.
And if people take nothing else from it, learn that politics is a team sport. It is not, it is an individual action, but you also have got to think about the team more broadly, and you've also got to think about, think about this. Voting for black people is complicated. It's complex. You know, we think about individuals like John F. Kennedy, yet John F. Kennedy's record in the Senate is troubling.
Yeah,
we think about folks like Lyndon B. Johnson, who as a senator wanted to block civil rights. We think about people like Abraham Lincoln, and we talk about the honest Abe, who Abraham Lincoln wanted to send all Negroes back to Africa and drop them off because he thought they were a problem.
And that's why once again, my phrase that always gets thrown out the window is tell the whole story.
Yes.
But I feel like that's once again, even in America, we don't come up with that ingrained in us. Like, we like to be the victors. We want to just tell our part of the story, and it's kind of like, and that's why I honestly got into studying world history, because I want to know, okay, I learned about Pearl Harbor from our side, but what do what is the other side? Yeah, like,
we teach things from a Eurocentric perspective. Our curriculums that we were exposed to are inherently racist, and that is the main problem, I think, that you just highlighted about not telling the whole story.
Yeah. So like, once again, man, I just want to really thank you for taking the time, out of your busy schedule. You here on business, what I'm saying? You still took the time out to come talk to us and really, give our listeners, a good understanding of like what's really going on out here. And this wasn't really about, because we argue enough on Facebook, I'm sure, but I wanted to make sure this wasn't an argument. We didn't get into like what I think versus what you think. I just really wanted to set some ground rules of like, hey, what's going on outside, man? Are y'all paying attention? Maybe look into this, so I hope that our listeners have gotten that from you, and I think they have. Once again, I learn from you every time I talk to you, man, so just
appreciate it. Learn from you all too, because I tell people all the time really quickly, we can study this, but it's the people on the ground who are doing the hard work, who oftentimes are in touch with the people while we are separated by the academy.
And so as we get ready to bring this podcast to a close, we're going to have a little fun. I'm going to ask you some questions to close out.
Okay.
And these are just random, rapid fire, So I'm going to ask a question. You give me an answer and a why.
Okay.
Mississippi or Indiana?
Mississippi.
Why?
It's home. It's home. I feel like I'm effective there. Mississippi definitely needs us. It needs people to return, people to lift the state. Mississippi is rich in culture, rich in history, and so Mississippi will always be the place I want to return to.
When you go home to Mississippi, what's one meal that you want that you can't get anywhere else?
Oh, if I go home to Mississippi, I want my grandmother to cook me some field peas with cornbread, candy yams, and neck bones.
You said that with conviction.
And Granny, I'm coming. But right now, she said we can't come to her house because of the coronavirus.
Oh, man. I about to say the boys ain't the only thing shut down with this coronavirus. I about to say, the old people don't play when they come to
my grandma said, ain't nobody coming to her house until this shit is over.
Oh, man. So, last question. Got to make it good. What do you think is the outcome of this 2020 election? Not what you want, not what you feel like. What you
I don't like doing predictions about the election. As an academic, as a political scientist, I'll tell you who I follow. His name is Alan Abramowitz. He's a professor of political science at Emory. He has one of the best presidential prediction models about what will happen that's not based off polling, and he's never been wrong.
Yeah.
Now,
okay.
What do I? And so you go to his website, you can find that model. I don't really know. I'm praying that Donald Trump is removed from office.
I think we all praying.
But I do believe
one way or another, we all praying.
I do believe he's going to be a hell of a candidate to defeat, no matter who runs, because white supremacy is what is driving his support.
Okay. Well, with that being said, man, give the people where they can find you, how they can contact you, where, if they want to talk to Dr. Emmett, Riley, how can they get in contact with you?
Yeah, so you can go to emmettriley.com, EMMITTRILEY.com, or you can follow me on Twitter at Dr. Riles06, and you can reach out to me. I do a lot of political commentary there, or you can find me on Facebook at Emmett Y. Riley III, PhD, and you can get periodic updates of some of my analysis or op-eds that I write. Yeah.
Okay. Good stuff, man. Good stuff.
I appreciate you having me on.
Hey, man. Anytime you in town, you always welcome to come to Trillmonga, man. Whatever you need, just say the word. The city is gonna be yours, man.
I appreciate it, bro.
Well, with that being said, man, we want to make sure to thank you all for tuning in to the first podcast. Once again, go follow Trillmonga on Instagram, TRILLMONGA. Also, make sure to keep up with us at Trillmonga.com. We also, once again, want to shout out our two co-hosts who aren't here with us today, but they'll be back next week. My brother Mike Hargrove. Follow him online at Stargrove, STARGROVE_. He's doing a lot of good work. He runs the music wing of Trillmonga. He's also building his own music group, GMG Music Group. He's not only a dope artist, but he's a very talented audio engineer. He's pretty much a one-man band. Whatever you need him to do, he does. So shout out to Mike, man. I see you out here grinding. Also, shout out to my boy Josh Arthur, who's also the next co-host. Josh just got a new job, so congrats, Josh. So he couldn't be here today, but he'll be back with us next week also. Follow him on IG also, Josh Arthur. The only thing missing is the U when you spell that out. So JOSHARTHR. Josh Arthur. Follow his Dojo 7 brand, and until next episode, we got some dope guests coming up for you all, and we want to thank Dr. Emmett Riley once again for kicking us off right. We started with politics. The next episode is going to be even better. We're going to get into some fun. We're going to get into some knowledge. We're going to get into some good music like we always do. But thank you all for tuning in to Trillmonga, the podcast. Episode 1, we out.
All right. Appreciate it, bro.
Hey, man.